together some type of a document, like say a quick budget that's 1 to 2 pages, or a, budget in brief, or a budget at a glance, something like that, that you can show them and say, this would be a really simple thing that you could pass out to, citizens. I mean, something that you can, some tangible thing that you can hand them and say, what do you think? And give them a work product. For the budget itself, the big gigantic document that's, 200 and something pages long this time, that's something that you'll probably want to make recommendations for the city manager on some things that you think would help the public get more out of it. So it may be that just by putting a budget at a glance on the website, we can say, this is the easy way to look at the budget. This is where it is. This is how you get your money. This is how we spend your money. This is how it ebbs and flows. And then the big budget document, if there's things that we can add to that, it is a very fluid document. If you've looked at the budgets from back in 2006-07, they were little bitty, teeny tiny, skinny things. They used to be great big 300-400 page long documents that people kind of slogged through and said, oh my gosh. So there's got to be something in the middle there where it's manageable, where people aren't reading something that's so long that they just fall asleep midway through it. There's got to be something that interests them. Maybe there's, throwing graphs in the letters or something along that line. But those are the recommendations that you would make for the master document to the city manager. I think what we really want to see also is something that we can throw on the web and say, here's your budget. And what I can do for you is if you and Roscoe would like to have a copy of the 16-17 budget in Excel, then you can play with make charts and play with some of the tables. That might help the great big fat document, but it's mostly in Excel. All of the descriptions for the funds, all that's all in Word, but everything else is in Excel. So that could be helpful for putting together, a budget in brief or a budget, at a glance.
Okay.
I was just going to comment, we may need some help with that. I'm not exactly an Excel power user, and trying to put together the pie charts and things like that would probably require some assistance on how to do that.
I can help you with that. I am a power user.
Good.
Good. Go ahead, and then I'll discuss this.
Well, I was just going to ask if we're still going to have a workshop at the July meeting, because if we're going to invite the public in and actually have more of a working session, to me it would be helpful if we had a couple of different samples that we looked at and were able to really talk about the best way to present the information. But we would need to have something to work from in order to do that, I think. And we have really been focusing on the budget in brief. We have not gotten into any kind of a discussion yet at all about the entire big budget and any kinds of recommendations that we could make to the city manager for improving that. So it would be good to get task one out of the way, and then we could focus on the bigger issue. So that's my thoughts at this point. And do you know if we still are going to have the workshop?
We can. We just need to find out everyone's availability.
Okay. So I kind of want to maybe try to summarize this. And actually, I agree with everything that's been stated up here. I also viewed it similar to what Betty and Dave said in terms of phases. And what Marlis is saying, the first phase being we have to have some type of budget in whatever the first phase is, budget in brief, I believe. Okay, and so in looking through all the samples and everything that was there, I thought we've got to get something on paper, or we're not going to be prepared to invite the citizens in. And one thing that struck me, as several of you have said, every sample we looked at was high level. Where's the money coming from? Where's the revenue? Some people might think 90% of it is taxes versus, 20%. And number two, where are the money's going? What are they being spent on? So that's pretty much what I thought. I'm just going to take a crack at something and pass it out. We can discuss it. And then if I do believe we want to have a citizens workshop, and number one, we want to gauge whether there's any interest. There's no use doing all of this work if the citizens are not interested in it. Maybe you just stop at phase one. We're also trying to tie some of this effort with the WRF-CAC advisory board, so we can do that. But so what I did, Susan, and those of you that have these, this is just simple Excel, and I took the general fund, not everything, just start with the general fund. And as you see on the first page, the top half is the revenues. I took them right off your sheet there. I had to do a little categorization because I don't want to have 15 categories. I think that's too confusing. And there's what you get, a simple pie chart. Some of them are in color, but I was running low on toner. The bottom half is the same number, the 12.7 million. Again, that's our budget, and that kind of keeps that right in everybody's focus. And there's how it's being spent. And I did it two ways. The second page, I did it by category. First page, I did it by basically, expenditures, type of expenditures, so people can see what we're spending on police and fire. And the other thing is, a lot of our discretionary money in cities comes from the general fund, obviously. So when people say, well, do this, do streets, put more money here or there, number one, you need to look at and understand, I believe, that in our city, as in many cities you looked at right in here, 72% is going to salaries. So if you're going to, encumber the general fund with any large expenditures, you're probably looking at salary cuts one way or the other. And if you look at salary, a lot of that's public safety, which makes it very difficult to. So anyways, that's what I did with that. I thought if that looked reasonable, and maybe one or two other very simple. If we want to get something in front of the public, I think we have to at least start with some charts and ask them, do you want to see general fund? Do you want to see WAD? And what I'm thinking is, and this kind of plays into two things, the two other committees, the Public Works Advisory and the WRF-CAC. If you look on the second page, that's a budget expenditures by category. I would take another little pie chart and I would say something like street maintenance. This is a big issue. The revenues for street maintenance, $237K gas tax, $450,000 a year Measure Q, $70,000 or whatever, $200,000 from general fund. That would be one chart. Right above it, expenditures, street, trees, storm drain. Or even take the storm drain and trees out if you can segregate it. If not, it needs to be addressed, because people think you're spending money on street maintenance when in actuality it's going to storm drains and the trees in the middle of the street. So that would be one suggestion of a special, but again, let's ask the public. The second one I would tackle, and this will be a little bit later, we're working with WRF-CAC. Get those revenues, I get them on a very simple, here's the revenues, here's the expenditures. So that was kind of my thought on what we need to do to get something.
I agree. The only thing I would add would be one more pie chart that basically shows the various funds, because I think people don't understand that when they're paying their water bill and sewer bill, that's where the transfers come in. And so in order for them to understand transfers in and out, they have to know that there are these special funds. So I would add that pie chart.
And you know what? I would have done that, but because of the transfers in and out, I couldn't quite figure it out. But, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I saw it on some of the other cities' charts here where they had water fund, harbor fund, whatever. So we could do that, but at least we'd have something to show the public if we're ready at the workshop, which I believe the workshop's in lieu of our next meeting. Is that correct? We don't have a July meeting scheduled? So this would be the time to just get and see what the interest is. That's the key thing. I'm very concerned because we have we had good attendance at the street summit, and we have excellent attendance, obviously, at the WRF-CAC, but more of that, I think, is related to siting versus cost. But let's see what, maybe we can hammer something out. And it's not really, in my opinion, a lot of this work's been done by the other cities. If the other cities are all doing revenue and expenditures in this kind of a categorization, let's start there.
We would need to publicize it. We'd really need to do a big job of really, getting the word out that we're going to do this and really inviting the public in and contact through all of our groups and organizations and talk about how important it is because, it's easy to complain, but this is a chance to learn more about the budgeting process and where the money comes from and goes. And I know people have a lot of questions about it, so I think we should be prepared to also answer some questions.
Could we get that all done by the next meeting in 4 weeks?
You mean as far as public outreach
yeah.
and, well, we can put something on the website, and we are too late to put anything in the water bills to remind people. I think today's 21st. Yeah, we're too late for the water bills. I think the only thing that we could perhaps do and can absolutely do with our council member here who could announce it at the next meeting and announce the fact that we were going to have a workshop on the budget. So that would be good. And we can announce it also at the July council meeting.
Let me ask one other question, just real quickly. Hold that thought. What about deferring to August? Because that would be before the street summit. It might tie in a little better and give you a little more outreach.
No, you're gone in September, correct, Dave? Okay, so yeah, August might be a better time if Bosco's available as well.
It would be in lieu of our regular meeting. I don't know, do we have anything on the schedule for August yet? I thought we had a couple dark months there. And I know the council meets less frequently. I would say push it out to, would be my vote, push it out to August so we can get ready.
I like what you did here, Barbara.
Thanks.
It makes it much more concise and readable. I do like the idea of having the street maintenance included on there. And my other thing, a few glossary terms might be good to put on there. And I don't know, I know you did this so well and you got it all characterized. Where would you put goals and objectives? Maybe that is something.
So you can put labels in there,
exactly.
and, I'm not a real power user, but I just kicked this out, but I could.
I would think if we got those elements in, that would be our basic outline to move forward.
And we don't have to have this perfect for August. What we have to have is like a couple different templates and say, do you, and I just thought of the street maintenance one because it's a little dollar amount, so it'd be pretty easy to get the numbers, number one. And number two, it would be right before the street summit in the fall. So kind of, grease the skids for, oh, by the way, what kind of budgeting should we be reporting? And so, yeah, those are good suggestions, and I could maybe refine this a little bit with Susan and Dave's help. I envision we just have, this workshop is not going to be here on this forum. It's going to be in a conference room, and we'll see who shows. And will we have PowerPoint or something like this to throw it on the board, or just pass them out, basically?
Yeah, I thought that maybe we would be able to either use one of the rooms in the community center, or perhaps our City Hall annex might be big enough where we've got a larger area, we've got the ability to put things up on the screen to look, for viewing. It's probably got a little bit more room, depending upon how many people we think we're going to have that come. We can go for a bigger room. I can always contact the community center and see what they have available in August.
I'm even interested in, whiteboard and flip charts and just pass this out. Not everybody's as tech savvy as some of us might be gifted, but just.
Yeah, that too. We could even do it just right here on the floor instead of you being up there, bring it down.
That'd be okay.
Yeah.
That would work.
Yeah, I think that the thing to emphasize is that it's a working session. It's an opportunity for the public to be involved in this process, not forming the budget, but in how we're reporting it, and really their chance to ask questions about the budget, because I'm sure that's what most people would be interested in.
Similar to what we did on some of the community outreach for the WRFCAC and that, just welcome everybody, have Susan here, we can answer any questions, have them come up and address, pass out these, hey, this is what we're looking at, what do you guys think, or, what would you like to see? I'm sure Mr. Heading would join us, and let's see what we get. And if there's
Sounds
not a lot of interest after doing an effective outreach, we'll still put this on the website. You can measure how many views, can you? Yeah?
I think so.
Okay.
So on the logistics, you're going to have the street summit in September, and if we're going to do us in August, do you think we would be conflicted with the audience? I mean, I like the idea of going to August, but I just wondered, would it conflict with getting an audience?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Because you're dealing with, you're still going to have people who are interested in streets, and they're going to want to see how our money is spent on streets. You may actually get some of the same people coming to both meetings.
Yeah.
Now, that
Because
would
they
be
want to
good.
get a little bit of pre-information, then take it to that meeting and have a little bit more to deliver there.
And it'll be the same people who come to our other meetings, which will be good, because those are the people that are involved and want to give us input, and we welcome that.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay. Go ahead.
What time of day are you planning on scheduling the workshop?
Well, right now your meetings are from 3:30 to 5. If you wanted to schedule it earlier, we could. If you wanted to schedule it later, we could. If you want it for another day, I can see what availability we have. If you want it later in the afternoon, you want it starting maybe like 4:30 and going into 7 or something
I
like
would
that.
recommend 5:30, just so that people who work are able to attend. And that seems like a decent time, and plan on, 2 hours at the most, I would assume.
Yeah, that seems to be the most of the feedback we get on the other committee. They like them, a little bit more in the evenings. The other thing is August, it's still light out, so.
Right.
I was going to comment that I think the meeting at 3:30 is an impediment to the public coming in and participating in these meetings. So if we're going to do a workshop, definitely I think we should be doing it later in the afternoon, 5:36, so that hopefully we can get some of our citizens to attend and give input. And if not, then maybe we can try to solicit some input via the web or city website, or I'll post something on nextdoor.com, which is it's a local social media website for neighborhoods, and I did post the 2 openings on our committee on nextdoor.com, so hopefully we can get some interest that way too.
That'd be great, thank you.
Yeah, and maybe Dave would be willing to write a column about it in the Bay News as a way to publicize it. You might suggest it to
That
him.
being Dave Buckingham, right?
Yes,
Dave Baton.
that would be correct. Or a city manager.
I can do that.
Okay, thank you. So I guess our action would be to get these electronically. Dave, would you collect them? And then we just need to decide between now and our meeting, we may have an informal meeting of the agenda, or, and I don't want to overwhelm them with 10 examples. So, I can tell you right now, we're going to eliminate Walnut Creek and some of the other ones that are just overwhelming, and just say, hey, we can mention them and discuss, but just say, don't want to give you too many choices, want to just summarize it. Okay. So you'll get the ball rolling, Susan, on getting a room and time, the 3rd Tuesday in August?
I'll see what I can do. If I can't find anything, we'll at least we won't have this room for an evening meeting, because right after, at 6 o'clock, Planning Commission comes in. So we may have to have another date, but I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
I just have a quick question. Now, if we're going to do a little work ahead of time, is it permissible for us under the Brown Act, for instance, if I were to help with this? Or is that, I mean, when you're preparing, we're not discussing anything, this is just preparation.
It's a workshop, yeah, it's
Yeah.
not a meeting.
It's
Right.
workshop materials, you're not making any decisions
Right.
other than preparing documents. You probably want to make sure that whatever ideas you come up with, perhaps you feed to Dave, and you and Dave communicate, or Barb and Dave communicate, or Betty and Dave, and that's how you do it, or Roscoe, and, just try to centrally, you don't want to do you, Barbara, and Dave, because then you're getting,
Well, wait a minute,
You're right.
we have 7 members now, so
Yes.
3 could,
you could, you're
Yeah.
right, you're right.
just to keep everybody honest.
Do you know how soon we will have, assuming that there are some more applicants, how soon they would be able to be seated on the commission here?
So it closes on Friday. I don't know when do you know, Brooke, when we're having, I don't know when we're having
Interviews.
interviews.
Okay. But possibly they could be here for, certainly the August meeting.
I would hope so.
Yep, okay.
Because it would be my guess that if we're closing, I don't know if we could get it in time. It'd be July, maybe the first meeting in August, we're doing interviews.
But we would still notify the applicant of any upcoming meetings, we do call them on.
Perfect, they could come, yeah.
They can
'cause it's
still
open
come.
They can still.
As a workshop.
Very
Okay,
good.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay, so I think we've covered that topic. Perfect. All right, thank you all. And we'll get our stuff to you, Dave, and start working on this. Okay, so that brings us to the last agenda item, B3. Consider benchmarks with similar cities. And thank you, Susan, for the website notes there. So I guess for discussion and questions, I did look at one of these a while back, but it looked like it was very good, Michael Coleman's website, but there was, and there were some metrics there. I didn't know how to get the numbers from the city. I think we need to focus on getting this budget and documented, and, in response to some of those, then we can go in and maybe look at some benchmarking in that. But the other thing I thought of with us right now in our committee having the openings is I'd like to get somebody new with one of us or something, one of the new people assigned to this. We have Dave and Roscoe doing that, a couple of us serving on a couple others and committees. So I think for right now, the best action would be for us to check these sites out and kind of learn about it. We got to start, so we'll have something by October. But I'm open to comments and suggestions.
Well, I do have a few comments. First of all, I think that before we even tackle this, we would need to very clearly understand what the research questions are. What does the council really want to know about these other cities? It just says the budget, but there's many different elements about the budget that we could benchmark. So first it's, what are they trying to find out? What kind of questions do they have that they want answered that benchmarking would help them? So first the questions, and then some guidance on the dimensions or variables to benchmark. That's also very important. Is it just the percent of allocation to various categories? Is it the amount of staff that each one has? The overall budget? So what exactly are the dimensions that they want benchmarked, or the variables? And then finally, the criteria for selecting cities to benchmark. Because it isn't just similar sized population. It's not, that's one criteria, but there's many others that really need to be taken into account if you're going to get any kind of results that are meaningful. Like the average income of the citizens you would need. is it a coastal city? What's the economic driver for the cities? Because cities are so different that if you really want to look at the data and have it tell you something, you really have to be looking at cities that are similar on a number of dimensions. And so I think that before we proceed further down this path, we would need to have some of those questions answered. And I'm not sure if the council should make those decisions or if the city manager wants to weigh in on them, but I would really recommend that we put a hold on it until it's clearer what kind of a study or what we're being asked to do, and also what this committee is being asked to do. So are we actually going to do the research, or are we going to oversee the research? And staff would do the research and they would report to us. So our role needs to be clear, because I have actually done benchmarking studies, and so I know how much work is involved in them. And I just question starting out on a project like this unless we're real clear on the things I just talked about. So that's my
I'd like
thoughts.
to open it up for public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. John Heading, City Council person. I was the one that brought this up at the City Council meeting, and the intent as we discussed this was to benchmark with quote-unquote other cities that might be similar, and we really hadn't defined what that would be. The expectation was a small cohort of cities similar to what our consultant had done in terms of selecting like cities, so it might be those cities that were compared to. And at a higher level, try to determine if there are any areas, for instance, in the area of the general fund expenditures. If, I'll just use as an example, I'll pick fire. If we're spending as a city, 50% more on fire services than the majority of the other cities, that might be an area to really dig into and look at further opportunities for possibly reducing expenditures or explaining what the differences are. So it wasn't well-defined on purpose. It was really to allow you to select the groups that you would like to compare to. And I think we have some examples in some of the studies that have been done. And then secondarily, a higher level review of expenditures and really expenditures, because revenues are very simple with regard to this city. It's not significantly different. But to get a sense if we are out of line in any areas and where we might be able to dig down further. So that was the concept, to allow you to really open it up and take a look at that. Otherwise, you could spend hours looking at finite data within departments, how many FTEs there are. That really was not the intent. It was a high-level review or overview to give us any guidance that you might see from benchmarking. Thank you. Any questions I might be able to answer?
Well, I think that was very helpful because that's the kind of guidance that I think this committee would need in order to proceed. And once you framed it that way, it becomes clearer how we should proceed.
Great.
So, thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I did have one question.
Yes.
So when you're selecting the cities, we can do 4 cities that we feel that meets the criteria, 5 cities. There's no limit to the cities we want to check.
I think a good guiding document might be the management partners document that has a list of cities that you could just pull out and use as examples. That is an ongoing study. Those cities are some very similar to us, some within the county, some outside of the county. Rather than reinventing the wheel this year, possibly just select those cities, use those for high-level benchmarking, and not spend a lot of time trying to identify a lot of criteria for what cities we should look at. I think they've done a good job of identifying those.
And then on the benchmarks, you mentioned in your discussion here about fire, those expenditures. So are you looking for street maintenance, particular fire, other issues that we should be looking within those cities for?
You know, I think the intent was where there might be statistically significant differences in our expenditures and or revenues as you look at a higher level comparison to other cities similar to us. And if you find that, and again, I just use it as an example, we're spending 50% more on fire services or police services, or you pick it, I'm not picking on those departments, then the majority of the other cities, that might be a drill down opportunity to look at, well, maybe the city of Morro Bay is spending much more on equipment within that department, and therefore there may be a good explanation for that, and there may not be, and that might be a target for looking at the budget next year in terms of reducing expenditures.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, John. And I just wanted to make a comment, but you can sit down, you're excused. But the general comment would be, I viewed this as kind of an open-ended assignment. When it's not very specific, you know, you go do something, you start off, and this has been very helpful. But in the benchmarking I've done in the corporate world in IT, there are standard benchmarks that every company uses. And if you can get the data, it's pretty simple to use them. That's the key. So what I did, Susan, is you had provided, because we've been talking about this for a while, but we haven't done anything yet. We will. But I looked at the, I think it was some kind of budget management training, maybe back in 2013, and that you had gone to, and you had provided us that information. I went through all that a month or so ago. City of Irvine gave a big presentation, so did the city of Riverside. So I looked at the basic metric because I found it in a footnote somewhere. I thought, well, they must all be using this, and it's quite obvious. It was general fund expenditures per capita. That's pretty easy to calculate. City of Irvine was $621. City of Riverside was $715. And I tried to look at ours. I wasn't quite sure, but it came out to over $1,200. But there's a reason for that. You know, those are bigger cities, and I just grabbed that because that was the data that was there, and that's a good metric that I would use for this. So I agree with John. We go to MSA, and I think it was like, Half Moon Bay or one of those similar cities. We'll grab that data if we can. And then we may grab some other data that we have, and we may take it across a couple different, start with 3, 4, 5 metrics and go from there. And if that doesn't yield any results, that's how we will get council or city management to help us focus. Well, this isn't quite what we were looking for. Maybe, maybe not. So that's kind of the approach. It's just on our bucket list here. I've been trying to I really wanted to concentrate first, and we can do this concurrently, but I wanted to concentrate first on getting these budget-friendly docs and our other budget documents reviewed. Go ahead, Marla.
Well, I was just going to say or ask then, this October deadline, are we going to try to stick to that and have something by October?
I think that needs to be moved back. I think we really need to focus on the budget-friendly docs, getting these openings filled, people transitioned. We'll be up against another quarterly review. We're going to have to do Measure Q. You've also asked us to look a little bit at contracts, and I don't think we have anybody to look at that right now. And oh, I know what. We also wanted, we probably will maybe just make a recommendation that after the audit report last month, that maybe in about 3 months, our recommendation to council would be you ask for a report from city staff on the response to that, or what changes have been made to address some of those weaknesses. I think that's a high priority from a finance, and obviously filling the director of finance position, that some of us here are going to participate in that as well. So just trying to, I don't want to do 80% of everything, I want to do 100% of a few things and start the others.
So we'll probably need a recommendation from the committee to say that you'd like to extend the deadline, because in Mr. Buckingham's budget letter, it specifically said he wanted something to inform the 17-18 budget. So that's why I drug the timeline into October, because we have so few opportunities in November and December to, to present anything. I figured that would be a better timing on that. So it'd probably be a good idea to go ahead and do that as a recommendation to the city manager, that we
Or
can.
you guys want to wait and see if maybe we can kick out some of this? I could kick out something, but
Well, I wouldn't mind spending some time in the next month, since I think we talked about possibly not having a meeting in July. In the next month, I would have some time to look into this more.
Okay.
Which I'd be
Let's
willing
see
to
what we
do.
can do. I don't want to be too, but I just want to set realistic expectations. But we'll try to do something. Maybe we can come up with something. Like I say, I've already started some of it, but
Okay.
it's 2013, so we got to find 2016 numbers.
Yeah, part of it is just finding the data, which
Yeah.
is not that easy to do, but yeah, I'm going to try, and you'll
Okay.
try also.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Okay. Any other comments? Anybody? Guys okay with this? Go ahead, Dave. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make a few comments. I was really interested in this agenda item and gave it a little bit of thought. And I think it's a worthwhile, benchmarking is a worthwhile thing to do. One of the issues is, one of the questions that I came up with is, what other cities are we going to benchmark against? Now, mentioned the Management Partners report, that could be a source of cities to benchmark against. But one comment I'd make is that, again, it's known that I work for the city of Santa Rosa, the fifth largest city in the Bay Area. And they're a full-service city, population of 170,000 people, over 1,000 employees, general fund budget about $135 million a year. And Morro Bay, Little Morro Bay, of 10,000 people with fewer than 100 employees, in its own way is almost as complex. The city organization is almost as complex as Santa Rosa. So when you're benchmarking, you really would need to, I would think you would need to find communities that are full-service cities with all that complexity in order to get decent data to be able to compare Morro Bay with. So I agree with pretty much everything that Marlis and Barbara said. The metrics are key, knowing what to measure. And also one question I would have is, how deep of a dive do we need to go into analyzing the data in order for this to be useful in developing a budget? Because if you're just taking a very high-level look at it, then, how useful is that going to be given the differences between communities? So you would definitely need to, I would think to be useful, you would need to get into a little bit more detail, maybe even to the department level, comparing one community to another. And I would think you would also need to take into account demographics and economic factors too. Morro Bay is a heavily tourism-dependent economy. If you take Santa Rosa, for example, Santa Rosa is a very diverse economy. Now, the scale's much larger, obviously, but Santa Rosa and other communities one community might have significant retail, which brings in more sales tax. Morro Bay is heavily dependent on transit occupancy tax. And obviously sales tax is a big source of revenue, but you're going to have to look at the revenue base, the economy, demographics and what the city does. So I think there's a certain amount of complexity to doing this. It's a big undertaking, really, if you want to do it in a way that's going to make it useful, it's actually going to inform the budget process, from my perspective. One other issue too is are we simply looking at how money is being spent, or are we going to look at the results of that? How efficiently? What are we going to include performance metrics and results as part of that comparison, as opposed to just expenditure amounts? Because expenditure amounts aren't necessarily going to tell you what you need to know, depending on the local economy and the local population. And I think that's all the comments I have. Thank you.
Excellent comments. Very good.
I especially like the performance one, because when you look at it, what we're doing, and we're funding ourselves, and we're not getting loans and all of that, I think that's important to say the full service we're doing with managing what we have.
No, I absolutely agree, Dave's points. As I've said before to some of us, we do this in the IT world, and we usually end up hiring a pretty high-paid consultant to put all these metrics together, because there's so much detail to go through to really make them useful. But I think we can make a good start at it, and let's see where that takes us. And maybe council's recommendation will be a deeper dive that we can't do, but maybe staff can, or maybe some outside, or MSA, or whomever. But I think we need to start somewhere. So those are excellent points. Thank you, Dave. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, so I think that brings us concluding comments, and then we'll discuss, let's see, we will not have a regularly scheduled July or August meeting, so we're going to use the July timeframe maybe to look at some of these sites and get educated on the benchmarking. And any of us want to, take a stab at it, that would be wonderful.
Well, I was just thinking that if we actually make some progress, we may want to have a July meeting, because otherwise it would be September before we're able to even talk about it if we meet in August as a workshop. So we could, if you don't mind, leaving it open at this point, and if we make progress, we can let you know, and you could schedule a meeting?
We can go ahead and keep the regularly scheduled meeting for July, and if something comes up, a week before, we can always cancel it.
Okay, that'd be good, because that would help prepare us for the budget workshop in August. So,
There was something else I wanted to mention
Sure.
to my fellow committee members. I was hunting around on the web for municipal benchmarking websites and information, and I came across a website, the Pioneer Institute for Public Policy Research. This is a Massachusetts-based research institute, and they have a document called the Guide to Sound Fiscal Management for Municipalities, and it talks about benchmarking. And it's aimed at folks like us who are serving on finance committees and things like that. So I would recommend taking a look at that, and I'll be happy to send out the link and to that webpage. I thought it was pretty interesting.
That's great.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
It really gets into a lot of detail on what the author considers important metrics and what to look at.
it would help us.
Yes,
Very
it
good.
would. Thank you.
Okay, any final concluding comments? Betty?
No, I think it wasn't. When I put this on, maybe
You good?
I think it was a very productive meeting. I think we're really getting closer to trying to do the things that we feel are important, top priorities. And so I'm very confident that we can get ahead now that we have a better idea and some outlines and some focus.
Good. Dave? All right. Marlis?
I would just concur with Betty. Thank you.
Okay. And that's pretty much all I have, so we'll have a regularly scheduled meeting in July unless canceled otherwise. We'll, if nothing else will be on that, we would have 2 agenda items, benchmarking for discussion and prep for the citizens workshop in August. No formal meeting in August, and then resume back in September. Because the regular meeting in August would be the workshop unless you have to arranging the time later.
Did you want to also add to the agenda the update on the audit or any kind of recommendations that we might want to make if we're going to discuss that ahead of time?
Or hold off, I'm trying to think. It was just something on one of the, I want to give them time to, I think, respond and that.
I
so-
see. Okay, so put it off.
Unless you guys think differently.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in September, I think, because
Okay.
of the new.
Good, thanks.
What we can do is if we do decide to have a July meeting, our regularly scheduled one, I can put in there an update on the steps that we've taken so far to, remediate some of the issues that the auditor had.
Oh, okay. I was hesitant to ask you to do too much in lieu of everything that's going on, but if you're going to do it anyways and you have it ready, that would be wonderful. Sure. Thank you. Okay, I think that's it. Meeting adjourned, 4:59 p.m. Thank you all.